Good morning, friends. We're on chapter 27. The workshops in Block 31 have already been shut down. Her mother is taking part in a conversation of the women, led by Mrs. Ternovska. Dita sits at the back of the hut, her back propped against the wall. There are so many women that it's hard to find a spot to lean against. Margit comes over to join her and settles herself as best she can on the tiny piece of blanket provided by Dita. She chews her lower lip, a sure sign she's agitated. Do you really think they're going to transfer us somewhere else? You can count on it. I just hope it's not to the other world. Margit fidgets nervously beside her. They hold hands. I'm frightened, Atinka. We're all frightened. No, you are so calm. You even joke about the transfer. I'd like to be as brave as you, but I'm really afraid. I'm shaking all over. It's hot, and I feel cold. Once, when my legs were really shaking, Freddie Hirsch told me that the truly brave people are the ones who are afraid. How can that be? Because you have to be brave to feel fear and keep going. If you're not frightened, what's the advantage of choosing one thing over another? I saw Mr. Hirsch going past along the Lagerstrasse a few times. He was really handsome. I would like to have known him. He wasn't someone you could get to know easily. He spent his life inside his cubicle. He did the Friday chats, organized sports activities, resolved problems if they came up. He was very friendly toward everyone, but then he would disappear into his cubicle. It was almost as if he wanted to keep himself apart. Do you think he was really happy? Dita turns toward her friend with a look of incredulity. What a question, Margit. Who would know that? I don't know, but I think so. It wasn't easy for him, but I suspect he liked challenges, and he never got cold feet. You admired him, didn't you? How can you not admire someone who teaches you to be brave? But Margit hunts for the right words because she knows she's going to say something that might offend. But in the end, Hirsch did get cold feet. He didn't hold up right to the end. Dita gives a deep sigh. I've thought a great deal about his death. They've told me this and that, but I think that there's something missing. That there's something in all this that just doesn't fit. Hirsch giving up? No. But the registrar, Rosenberg, saw him die. Indeed. Although I've also heard that you can't trust what Rosenberg says. They say so many things, but I believe that on that afternoon of the 8th of March, something happened that changed everything. The unfortunate thing is that we'll never be able to ask him what it was. Dita stops talking, and Margit respects her silence for a few moments. And what will happen to us now, Datinka? Who knows? There's no point in worrying too much. You and I can't do anything. If someone decides to organize a revolt, we'll hear about it. Do you think there'll be a revolt? No. If there wasn't one with Freddie, without him, it's impossible. Then we'll have to pray. Pray? To whom? To God. Who else? You should pray too. Hundreds of thousands of Jews have been praying to him since 1939, and he hasn't listened to them. Maybe we haven't prayed enough, or loudly enough, so he'll hear us. Come on, Margit. God is capable of knowing that you've sewn a button on a shirt on the Sabbath and punishing you. But he hasn't discovered that thousands of innocents are being killed and many other thousands are being held captive and being treated worse than dogs? Do you really believe he hasn't found out? I don't know, Dita. It's a sin to question why God does what he does. Well, then I'm a sinner. Don't talk like that. God will punish you. More? You'll go to hell. Don't be naive, Margit. We're already in hell. Rumors continue to slither through the camp. There are those who say that the Germans are going to kill everyone. Others believe that they'll set apart those suitable for work and kill the rest. The priest comes into the camp without warning, accompanied by 2 armed guards. People pretend they're not watching him, but they don't take their eyes off him. The 3 Germans come to a halt at the entrance to one of the huts, and the capo instantly appears. She strolls anxiously around the immediate area and then points to a prisoner sitting along the side of the hut, a woman with a child resting his head in her lap. It's Aunt Miriam and her son Arya. The sergeant informs her that he has direct orders from Commandant Schwarzhuber. They're going to transfer her and her son to be with her husband. Eichmann had told her they'd soon be together. In this instant, he was telling the truth, but Eichmann's truths are even worse than his lies. They take Miriam and her son by jeep to Auschwitz I, and escort them into a room where 2 guards are holding the handcuffed Jacob by the arms with a vice-like grip. Miriam has a hard time recognizing him inside his dirty striped suit, and even worse, inside the shredded skin barely sticking to his bones. It probably takes him a moment to recognize her, because he isn't wearing his round glasses with their tortoiseshell frames. No doubt he lost them when he first arrived, and everything after that must have been a blur. Miriam and Jacob Edelstein have sharp minds. They immediately understand why they've been reunited. No one can begin to imagine what must pass through their minds in this instant. An SS corporal takes out his gun, points it at little Arya, and shoots him on the spot. Then he shoots Miriam. By the time he shoots Jacob, he is surely already dead inside. When the process to close Camp B2B is set in motion on July 11, 1944, it holds 12,000 prisoners. Dr. Mengele organizes the selection, which takes 3 days. Out of all the huts, he chooses Block 31 for the process, since, as it contains no bunks, it offers a brighter workspace. Mengele comments to his assistants that it is the only hut where the smell isn't nauseating. Although he is a great fan of autopsies, Mengele is also a refined person who can't stand bad smells. The family camp has come to the end of its life. Dita Adler and her mother get ready to pass through the filter of Dr. Mengele, who will decide if they live or die. They've been ordered to line up according to their huts after their breakfast slop. All the inhabitants of the camp are agitated. People move about on edge and go back and forth, using up what might be their last few moments. Husbands and wives run to each other to say goodbye. Many couples meet in the middle of the Lagerstrasse, halfway between their respective huts. There are hugs, kisses, tears, and even reproaches. There is still the odd person who says, "If we'd gone to North America when I told you." They all spend what could be their final moments in their own way. Before the indifferent gaze of the SS soldiers who have arrived in the camp, the capos angrily blow their whistles to order everyone back to their own barracks. Mrs. Ternovska comes over to wish Liesel good luck. "Luck, Mrs. Ternovska?" says another of the women from their group of bunks. "What we need is a miracle." Dita walks a few steps away from the bustle of people nervously wandering up and down. She senses that someone has stopped right behind her. She can even feel his breath in the back of her neck. "Don't turn around," comes the order. Dita, so accustomed to orders, stands rooted at the spot without looking behind her. "You've been asking about Hirsch's death, right?" "Yes." "Well, I know things, but don't turn around." "The only thing they've told me so far is that he was afraid, but I know that the fear of dying wouldn't have given him cold feet." "You're right about that. I saw the list of inmates the SS were going to reclaim and remove from the quarantine camp to be brought back to the family camp. Hirsch was on that list. He wasn't going to die." "Then why did he commit suicide?" "You're wrong about that," comes the reply, but there's hesitation in his voice for the first time, as if he doesn't know how much to tell. "Hirsch didn't commit suicide." Dita wants to know the full story, and she turns toward her enigmatic speaker, but as she does, he breaks into a quick run through the crowd of people. Dita recognizes him. It's the errand boy from the hospital block. She's about to set off in pursuit when her mother grabs her by the shoulder. "We have to line up." Their capo has started to lay about with her stick, and the guards are doing the same with their guns. There's no time. Dita reluctantly gets in line next to her mother. What does it mean that Freddie Hirsch didn't commit suicide? So then what? He didn't die in the way they told her? She thinks maybe the boy has invented his story, but why would he do that? It was all a joke, and that's why he ran off when she turned around. It's possible, but something tells her that's not the case. There was no smile in his eyes in that instant when she looked at him. She's now more convinced than ever that what happened in the quarantine camp that afternoon bears no resemblance to what people in the resistance are saying. So why would they lie? Maybe even they didn't know the ultimate truth of what actually happened. Too many questions at a time when the answers might come too late. There are thousands of people in the family camp, but they all have to pass in front of the compass needle eye of the mad Dr. Mengele, which points toward life or death. Groups have been going into and out of Block 31 for hours, and nobody knows for sure what's happening. They've been given their lunchtime soup, and they've been allowed to sit on the ground, but tiredness and nervousness caused by the weight have left their mark on the women in Dita's group. And rumors are rife, of course. The healthier inmates are being separated from the ill and the unproductive ones. Some of the women comment that Dr. Mengele is deciding who lives and who dies with his customary indifference. The male and female prisoners have to enter the hut naked so that the captain can examine them. Someone says that Mengele has at least had the decency to have the men and women go in separately. They say he doesn't even look at the naked women in a lustful way, that he looks at everyone with absolute indifference, that he occasionally yawns, tired and bored with his task as examiner of human beings. cordon of SS soldiers controls access to Block 31. The groups who won't go through selection that day stroll tensely around the camp. The teachers try to keep the children occupied until the last minute. Some groups sit behind the huts and try to organize guessing games or whatever else they can come up with. Even snooty Marquita is playing drop the handkerchief with some of her girls. Each time she picks up the handkerchief, she furtively lifts it to her face to wipe away her tears. Her 11-year-old girls who are running around full of life, arguing and fighting over who managed to touch the hanky first. Will the Germans consider any of them old enough to be part of the workforce, or will they kill them all? Finally, Dita is lined up with the women from her hut in front of Block 31. They make them undress and put their clothes on top of huge piles, which are starting to form a mountain range of rags on the surface of the mud. She feels more concerned for the nude body of her mother on public display than for her own. She turns away so she won't see Liesel's wrinkled breasts, her exposed sex, the bones sticking out from under her skin. Some women have their arms crossed in an attempt to hide their intimate parts as best they can, but most don't care anymore. There are small groups of SS soldiers on either side of the lines. They are at ease and off duty, and they spend the morning eyeing the naked women maliciously and making loud comments about the ones they fancy. The bodies are squalid, their ribs are more curved than their hips, and there are girls who have barely a wisp of pubic hair between their legs. But the soldiers are desperate for some distraction, and they are so used to seeing the skeletal thinness of the inmates that they cheer on the women as if they were luscious beauties. Tita tries to peer over the wall of soldiers to see what's happening inside the hut, but keeping up on her tiptoes. Despite the fact that her own life and her mother's are at risk, she can't stop thinking sadly about her liberty. The books are still in the hidey hole, stored underground and sleeping deeply. About her library. The books are still in the hidey hole, stored underground and sleeping deeply until someone finds them by chance and opens them, thereby restoring them to life, just like the Prague legend of the Golem, who lies inert in a secret place waiting for someone to resuscitate him. She now regrets not having left a message with the books in case some other prisoner trapped inside Auschwitz finds them. She would like to have said, "Take care of them and they'll take care of you." They have to wait naked for several more hours. Their legs hurt and they become weak. One woman sits down because she can't take any more. She refuses to stand up despite the shouts and threats of a young capo. 2 guards haul her off to the hut as if they were carrying a sack of potatoes. The rest of the women suspect that they'll have thrown her directly into the reject pile. Dita's turn finally comes, and enveloped by murmurs and prayers, she and her mother walk through the entrance of Block 31. The woman just in front of them is sobbing. "Don't cry, Edita," whispers her mother. "Now's the time to show that you're strong." Dita nods. Inside the hut, despite the tension in the air, the armed SS soldiers in the table in front of the chimney, where Mengele pronounces his sentence, she somehow feels protected. The Germans haven't removed the children's pictures from the wall. There are various versions of Snow White and her dwarves, princesses, jungle animals, and ships drawn in many colors from the early days when there were still some drawing classes. She realizes how much she misses being able to draw in Auschwitz as she used to in Terezin, to turn the chaos of her emotions into a picture. However, though the drawings and stools are still there, Block 31 no longer exists. It is no longer a school. It is no longer a refuge. Now, just inside the door, they come up against an office table with Dr. Mengele seated behind it, together with a registrar and 2 guards with submachine guns. 2 groups of those already selected are forming at the back of the hut. The one on the left will stay in Auschwitz, and the one on the right will be sent to work in another camp. The young women and the middle-aged women who look healthy, in other words, those who can still work, are in the group on the right. The other, much bigger group consists of small children, old women, and the women who look sick. When they say that the group on the left is going to stay in Auschwitz, they are telling the truth. Their ashes will settle on top of the forest slime and mix forever in the mud of Birkenau. The impassive Nazi doctor waves his white-gloved hand to the left and to the right, and channels people to one side of life or the other. He does it with remarkable ease and without hesitation. The line in front of Dita is dwindling. The woman who is crying has been sent to the left, with those whom the Reich deems weak and expendable. Dita takes a deep breath, and it's her turn. She takes a few steps and stops in front of the medical captain's table. Dr. Mengele looks at her. Dita wonders if he really will recognize her as a member of Block 31, but it's impossible to know what he's thinking. What she sees in the doctor's eyes, however, sends shivers up her spine. Nothing. No emotion whatsoever. The look is frighteningly empty and terrifyingly neutral. He recites the questions he spent hours routinely asking each inmate. Name, number, age, and profession. Dita knows that the instructions given to everyone are to name any profession that might be useful to the Germans: carpenter, farmer, mechanic, cook. And the instructions given to minors is to bump up their age and say they are older, so that they're more likely to make the cut. Dita knows all that. She has to be careful, but her character demands something different. Standing in front of the all-powerful Dr. Joseph Mengele, owner of life and death like an Olympian god, she recites her name, Edita Adler, her number, 73305, her age, 16. She's added a year. When it comes time to provide her profession, she hesitates briefly, and then, instead of saying something useful and convenient that will please the SS man with the Iron Cross on his chest, she finally says, painter. Mengele, bored, tired by what for him must be mere routine, looks her in the eye more attentively, in the same way that snakes lift their heads when prey comes within reach. Painter? Do you paint walls or portraits? Dita feels her heart beating repeatedly in her throat, but she answers in her impeccable German and with a composure that smacks of rebellion. I paint portraits, sir. Screwing up his eyes a little, Mengele looks at her with the faint hint of an ironic smile. Could you paint me? Dita has never been so scared. She couldn't be in a more vulnerable position, 15 years old, alone and naked in front of men with submachine guns who are going to decide right now if they will kill her or let her live a little longer. Sweat runs down her naked skin and the drops fall to the ground, but she answers with surprising vigor. Yes, sir. Mengele studies her slowly. It's not a good sign if the medical captain pauses to think. Any veteran would say that nothing good can come out of that mind. Everyone is waiting for the outcome. There's not a sound in the hut. You can't even hear people breathing. Even the SS guards with the submachine guns don't dare disturb the doctor's moment of reflection. Finally, Mengele gives an amused smile and, gesturing with his left hand, sends her to the right, to the fit group. But there's no sigh of relief from Dita yet. Her mother is next in line. Dita walks more slowly and turns her head to look back. Liesel is a woman with a sad face and a sad body, and her shoulders are hunched, all of which emphasize her sickly appearance. She's convinced she won't make the cut and is defeated before she even starts to fight. She hasn't a chance, and the doctor doesn't waste a second. Links! Left, the bigger group. The one for the useless women. Nevertheless, with no attempt at rebellion of any kind, simply because her mother's total bewilderment, or so it seems to Dita, Liesel heads toward the right behind her daughter and stands in a line where she shouldn't be. It takes her daughter's breath away. What's her mother doing here? They'll drag her away and there'll be a terrible scene. She'll chain herself to her mother, come what may. Let the guards drag both of them out. But fate, which has behaved so badly toward them, determines that just at this very moment, not one of the guards, tired of the docile manner of the prisoners and more concerned with eyeing the younger girls than with being vigilant, actually notices. Nor does Mengele. Distracted just then by the registrar, who apparently has not heard one of the numbers dictated to him and asks the doctor for his assistance. Some of the women sent to the left have shrieked and begged and thrown themselves on the ground, and the guards have had to drag them away. But Liesel didn't complain or protest. She has calmly walked nude in front of death's eyes with a naturalness and a lack of haste that would have unnerved even the bravest of the brave. Dita has to grab her chest to stop her heart from leaping out. She glances at her mother, who is standing behind her and looking at her absent-mindedly, seemingly unaware of what she has done. She's not brave enough to do something like that in a premeditated way, although Dita doesn't know what to think. Without saying a word, they hold hands tightly and squeeze as hard as they can, and they look at each other and say everything with that glance. Another woman joins the line and places herself behind Liesel to hide from the guard's line of sight. The Germans send them to the quarantine camp. Once there are joyous hugs among those who find themselves in this group, which has been saved for now, and dejected faces near the entrance waiting for relatives and friends who never arrive. Mrs. Ternovska isn't in the quarantine camp group, nor are any of the women who are part of her mother's conversation group. The children don't arrive either. And Dita has heard nothing more of Miriam Edelstein, although it is true that there's a great deal of confusion. They begin to evacuate the first groups of people toward the station platform before the final selections of B2B have been completed. Margit isn't in Dita's group either. It is a fact that they have momentarily dodged death. But survival is a minuscule consolation when so many innocent people are left behind to die.